I'll go ahead and call the January 21st, 2014 City Council meeting to order and ask those who would like to join the council and myself in the Pledge of Allegiance to please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under special business this evening is Agenda Bill 6770, titled Council Vacancy Position Number 2. No formal action is anticipated this evening, and the purpose of that is to hear presentations from those applicants who applied to fill the position vacated by myself when I became mayor. The city advertised to fill the open seat through a variety of means. 7 candidates applied. The clerk randomly drew candidate names to determine the order of applicants as listed above in the agenda bill, and each of those applicants will be making a 10-minute presentation. I've asked the clerk to provide a 30-second warning towards the end of your presentation so that you have enough time to summarize if you so desire. There were 5 questions that we ask applicants to address either in writing or during their presentation, and those questions are: why do you want to serve on the council, and who will you represent? The second question: what is it specifically that you would contribute to the council and the city? Third, what do you consider to be Issaquah's biggest opportunities or issues, and what would you do to solve them? Fourth, if you feel strongly about a topic and the majority of the council feels differently, how would you respond? And finally, if selected to fill the vacancy, what is the one thing you would like to accomplish during your term of office? Just as for information, following our regular council meeting, the council may move to executive session to begin discussion on qualifications, but the appointment is scheduled, and that decision is scheduled to be made at our February 3rd council meeting. So with those, with that background and those that discussion, the order of presentation is as follows: Terry Davis, Bill Ramos, Joan Probla, Brian Weinstein, Nina Mulligan, Tim Flood, and Cyrus Crone. So with that, I would invite Terry Davis to the microphone for his presentation to the council. Terry, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Fred. Well, just for some unusual background, I'll say happy anniversary to my wife of 42 years tonight, but she's at another meeting anyway. So for the members of the public present, since you probably haven't seen all the material the council has, I'm a registered engineer, degree in civil engineering, although you would find me more currently working in internet governance and cybersecurity, which is what I'm consulting in right now. So it doesn't make any sense, but life changes where we head. But I've got an extensive background over a whole lot of areas. I've also got a degree in strategic planning for critical infrastructure from the University of Washington. I'm a 30-year resident of the city. Over the last 15 years, I would say Issaquah has lost a little of our influence in shaping how the east side of King County develops. I'd like to see that regained. I think we've got some work to do within the city. I specifically don't think, and I'll talk about it a little more later, I don't think the downtown, Gilman Village, or even Pickering now have had quite enough attention in recent years. All of them have some long-term problems that I think need some work. The Highlands is going well. I was the first commissioner up there, so yeah, they're doing very well. I spent almost 20 years serving on most of the boards and commissions for the city up through the early 2000s, and then my travels for business just became too much for me to maintain that. I have since retired from Boeing. I'm only part-time consulting now, so I've got time again. One of the things I want the council, I hope they focus on, is coming up with a way to do balanced development across the entire city. We've seen almost nothing go on south of I-90 since the mid-90s. I think that part of the city has been left out of some of the moving forward. In all my years on all the various commissions and boards, I neither looked for development nor non-development. To me, what I wanted to do is make the city more livable for residents. So my decisions tended to be not pro-development, not non-development, but what makes the city more livable for those of us that live here in it. And that includes both the residents and business. I would strive to represent both sides, the residents and the business, in the process, not looking to favor either side, but again, what makes the city the most livable? And as I said, in the last decade, I backed away from the city just because of my work obligations requiring so much travel. I'm retired and only part-time consulting, so that's not a problem. What could I contribute to the council? I am a 30-year resident. We actually built our home up on Squawk Mountain in '85. The building department was across here in a building that used to sit where the other city hall sits. And it was an entry via a stair in the back. So, but when we moved into town, there was a four-way stop sign down here at Front and Sunset. You were just building Gilman. The skyport was still open where Pickering is. So I understand the rationales and the history behind all of these changes that have occurred over the past 30 years. And again, I've got this natural desire to promote the livability of the city. I'm not pro-bypass, I'm not anti-bypass. What will work for the city? The city sits at a natural geographic crossroads. The city is here because the early settlers' trade routes crossed here. And that's true of I-90, Issaquah-Hobart 900. They're there because of geology. We can't change that. We've just got to manage it. Issaquah's biggest opportunities. Well, again, find a way to improve our regional influence. Make smart decisions on our expansions. I'm not saying don't expand, I'm not saying expand, but make smart decisions on them. Make the ones that work for us. Encourage an appropriate business growth, especially in the valley. And I think also we've got the opportunity to enhance our position with Swedish coming in here as a regional medical center. We have a natural location that works for that. And again, working with our adjacent governments and everything else so that we strive for the best balance that we can get in East County here of development. Our issues will continue to be traffic. As I said, we can't change our geography. We are captive to that. People are going to come through Issaquah just based on where they live and work. I would especially like to see the downtown get more attention for its business development. And I think Pickering Place is going to need some attention now again from the council. And one thing I don't want to leave off is continuing the disaster planning that the city started. So, the disaster plans, having lived here this 30 years, and I grew up in rural Oklahoma, and we never had power outages. Maybe once in a while, but they were a few hours, even after a tornado. I've been without power 10 days up on the mountain from windstorms. You've still got the earthquake disasters that you need to continue to plan for. One of the things that's been kind of left out is wildfire. We don't think of ourselves as part of that scenario. A good friend, or two good friends, one a forester and one a geologist, used to point out to me that Mother Nature, even here in the Northwest, routinely burns her forests every 50 to 100 years. We're 50 plus years past the last logging around. It's something we need to keep in mind as we do disaster planning. On how to deal with a topic the council feels differently than I do. I've been sort of dealing with this my entire career. I've always been on the technical side trying to explain to management what they should do. It's important to work with the rest of the members that don't hold the same viewpoint to try to educate them on my viewpoint as well as understanding theirs. That can often take months, even years. If you really believe in your viewpoint, you continue to work on it and continue to bring evidence forward. Okay, there are actually two things that if I'm appointed I'd like to see accomplished. In the early 90s, we had a set of standards drafted for the downtown redevelopment. If you look at the Village Theater, the style of that is where we were going with a downtown redevelopment standard. Had we got that
30
through,
seconds.
Had we got that through at that time, we would have had something that looked probably like Bellevue's Main Street development, at least starting. The other thing I'd like is to complete the trail system. Throughout the early 80s and 90s, we gave the city right-of-way, the commission did, along most of the major developments, including behind the medical center north of Gilman and up the East Fork of the Creek. I'd like to see the Trails Center completed and all of that we started to give right-of-ways.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. The next presentation is from Bill Ramos. Bill, if you would come to the microphone.
Good evening, council members, mayor, citizens. I respectfully submit my application for Issaquah City Council to you tonight. My reasons for running are many and varied, but they're based in a lifetime of public service and working towards the common good. I'm dedicated to serving the city of Issaquah and to giving back to the community that has meant so much to me and my family over all these years. In 2009, I was appointed to the Human Services Commission, which I currently serve as Vice Chair. In 2013, I was appointed to the Economic Vitality Commission. These two commissions are complementary and to each other and foundational into building and maintaining a strong and vibrant community. I believe in the open public process of government, and it has been a pleasure to serve on these two commissions. Having served in the federal government, I find that city governments is the best example of active citizenship and the historical reminder of citizen legislators. Every one of the council members here today are here because of your dedication and active participation in the community. You're each willing to dedicate and volunteer your time to serving the community to make the city of Issaquah as best it can be. I would like to bring my skills and abilities to serve alongside you. In addition, I'm mission-driven in both my work and my personal life. Not just for myself and my family, but for the betterment of people and places where I live. No matter what community I've lived in, I've always worked to be a positive influence and to try to leave it a little better than when I came. With this in mind, I went to serve on the council. In 2009, I was recognized in a national award from the United States Secretary of the Department of Transportation for my public service. And in 2012, I received an award for community service from the Seattle Federal Executive Board. While I would do my best to represent everyone, my experience in working with many different communities has dramatically impacted my understanding about the different voices that need to be represented. So I will work to be sure that I will always be representing as many different voices as possible. I'm privileged to have had a 38-year career in the federal sector, 30 years of which with the United States Forest Service and 8 years with the Federal Transit Administration. As a director of departments of up to 50 staff, I've honed strong leadership and management and motivational skills. I am adept at project management and am fully versed in the parameters of human resources. I will bring my expertise in environmental review and analysis. I have led teams of specialists to determine the environmental impacts of many different and controversial projects, and to clearly present and understand the impacts and the consequences of these projects to the people and the community as well as the environment. In my 8 years as a community planner with the Federal Transit Administration, I administered over 400 transportation, and community development grants. I also the federal tribal liaison, working with over 50 tribes to build a stronger and more vibrant communities through betterment of public transit. I developed expertise in building strong transit systems with rural and particularly small urban areas such as similar to Issaquah here, as well as with tribes throughout Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. Becoming a specialist in this area required excellent community listening skills, needing to understand what was already in place, what the people wanted to achieve, how worked ways on how to achieve those goals, and to develop plans on funding and developing those. I also believe in an entrepreneur and small business owner, having owned a dance studio for 16 years and now a consulting firm. I thoroughly enjoyed being a dance instructor, and it created a sense of community all its own. I still run into people today that took lessons years ago that share what a community experience it was. Small businesses are a critical element of the economic vitality of our community. I've worked internationally in Honduras and Central America for the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and the United States Agency for International Development. Many diplomatic skills were learned as a guest in someone else's country at the same time trying to share ideas and work together to improve in their care and wise use of their natural resources. I've worked with a lot of competing interests for best short and long-term decisions, both within the United States Forest Service and the Federal Transit Administration. Difficult decisions require open conversations with all interested parties. I believe deeply in the open public process and transparent decision-making. There may not be a unanimous agreement, but the most important is that everyone is able to explain their position, why it has value, feel they have been heard and understood. If I feel strongly about the topic and the majority of the council feels differently, then the majority rules and the public process moves forward. While I may not agree with every position, I will always support the council's final decisions. I've always felt very comfortable working with people with different opinions and than myself. I believe debating in any issue on its merit is the purpose of the public process. The City of Issaquah has many opportunities to make decisions that will result in a better city for all its citizens in the next few years, such as enhancing economic development and preserving our outstanding quality of life. The possible annexation of Klahani would result in a 25% increase in our city in a very short time frame. And the implementation of the Central Issaquah Plan, both will be in the forefront of how change is coming soon. Both these plans are set up for the city to move into them and work those plans. But often as you move into reality, things change and they look a little differently. So as both these plans play out, I would be very cautious to fully understand any adjustments that need to be made and make sure there are no undesirable or unintended consequences and stay with our original goals. As a result of my experience in the field, I'm considered an expert in transit and transit planning and have a great deal of experience in witnessing how transit can totally change a community for the better. The transit situation now in Issaquah, both the current and the forecast future of that, is a threat to our strength and vitality as a city. If selected, I would like to work and bring my expertise and skills to the city to help improve our transit situation. In closing, I'd like to thank the council for your dedication and service to the City of Issaquah and for taking time to hear me tonight. I would like the privilege to be able to bring my skills and abilities forward to work with you in Issaquah in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Our next applicant is Joan Probola. Joan, welcome.
Thank you. I'm used to being up there on planning policy, but this seems really good tonight. So anyway, good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about my qualifications and interest in serving on the council. I believe it is an honor to be on the council, but I also know that it comes with huge responsibilities. Responsibilities not only to the citizens who now enjoy what Issaquah has to offer, but also to all those who will live here in the future. I don't take those responsibilities lightly, or any that I've had in the many organizations or committees on which I have served. I served as president of South Cove Homeowners Association for 3 years, where I began my training on effective ways to work with people. I served as president of the Issaquah Kiwanis because I believe in giving back to the community. I've served as president of the Issaquah Chamber, where I was chair of both the Government Affairs and Education committees. And last year, I was honored to serve as president of the 5,500-member Seattle-King County Association of Realtors, where I was ultimately responsible for a $1 million budget and the oversight of 7 staff. At the first meeting of both the Chamber Board meeting and the Realtor Board, the first item on the agenda was a review of the expectations of a board member. After discussion and vote, every member agreed that no matter the results, we were united in the outcome. I will follow that if I'm on the council. I've been on planning policy for 8 years and now serve as vice chair. I've served 12 years on the Arts Commission and now serve as chair. I served for 3 years on the original State Park Planning Group, on the Environmental Impact Study for the Central Area Plan, as the elected VP of Government Affairs for the Realtors, and presently serve on the State Legislative Steering Committee, and many more. I've studied extensively on what it takes to build a dynamic community. During my 20 years as a realtor, combined with my term on the planning policy, I've had to deal with issues such as shoreline management, wetlands, development rights, setbacks, lot line adjustment, impact fee, negotiating, strategic planning, balancing $1 million budget, and smart growth. I want to serve on the council to utilize all of my training to help plan for the city's future. In the last 15 years, I have served on several hundred candidate interview panels at the local, state, and national level, and now have contacts throughout the region. I serve as the Seattle-King County representative to the legislators in the 5th, 41st, and 48th District. I'm also the contact to the 8th Congressional District to Representative Dave Reichert. I have twice received commendations for my work with the legislators and on legislative issues. I can only hope that the relationships I have developed will be of service to any discussion with the council. I have a reputation for thinking out of the box, trying to be creative in making improvements on the ongoing processes. There are two things that highlight this creativity, for which I am especially proud. I petitioned the city for many years to annex South Cove, but was always told that it was in a distant future. But when the council approved $140,000 for a Klahani study, I asked Mark Kinthorne, who was in charge of city planning at the time, why not South Cove? Mark told me that the city didn't have another $140,000 for another study. Since the two areas are so similar, I suggested that they be analyzed together, saving in essence $140,000 for the city. He said, I never thought of that. I participated in the feasibility study, and after it was decided to go forward, I formed a small committee and went door to door to explain the process and the intended results to the community. We sent out a survey and received over a 60% response with 80% approval. This type of response to a survey is extremely unusual. I presented the responses to the city tied with a large red bow. And yes, we did save $300 in property taxes. My second real contribution to the city involves transportation. It doesn't always take a huge investment to improve traffic, but you have to think out of the box. The Chamber and the city's transportation department created what was called the Bucket of Paint project. In essence, we could help mitigate traffic with just a little bit of restriping. While we're reviewing the plans for improvements to SR 900, I noticed there was no intent to widen westbound exit 15. This was shortly after 2 were killed on the old eastbound exit. I contacted the state but was told there was insufficient right-of-way. I measured, took pictures, sent them to the state, and with the city was able to encourage the state to create a 2-lane exit ramp. I smile every time I go by the exit. We all know that Issaquah is a special place. Just a few years ago, it was indeed a small city. Today, it is bursting at the seams. The Central Area Plan is really integral to maintaining its reputation as a desirable place to live. For the last several years, the Planning Policy Commission has been dissecting the plan, as has the Council. It was always presented as a shell on which to build and improve it as time dictates. Now is the time to lay the foundation. Transportation is at the center and has to be paramount to making any decisions. But any decisions in regard to housing have to be made after a lengthy search of what buyers want, not only in housing, but what amenities are necessary to entice them to move here. Working with buyers and sellers for 20 years, I have a pretty good idea and want to work to offer any guidance that I can. I am proud of the fact that I stepped up to run for City Council several years ago. Win or lose, the process develops character, an understanding of the responsibilities, and a real sense of what the community wants. I met hundreds of people, heard their stories, and traveled to areas of the city that I didn't know existed. Many were concerned about the effects of doing anything to our downtown section. Our old town is and will always be the heart and soul of this community, and we must make changes to protect its viability. The future is upon us. I would like to see more emphasis on creating an area that is unique, maintains its character, and offers more opportunities as a gathering place. I know DIA is starting to work on this, but I think ideas should come from all avenues. There will always be issues with water, pot, bags, police, fire, but these issues do not define a community. They are handled through cooperation, understanding, and creativity with all of the stakeholders. I would like to see more citizen involvement, or to put it this way, I'd like to create more opportunities that citizens can join in the conversation and present their ideas. The changes to the city website are a beginning step, but more can be done. When I started my year as president of the Realtor Association, I was faced with a staff and a 20-member board of directors that was a little disjointed. Through listening, complimenting when appropriate, and developing team spirit, I not only created a better working environment, but also more ideas to prove the association came from people who felt they were valued. I hope to do this on the council. Economic development is not only bringing business into the city. It is more than the great work that DIA and Art East are doing to highlight art. It is creating an atmosphere where business can thrive. One way to do that is to cultivate a relationship between business and the environment. Issaquah is unique. Its trails offer opportunities for unlimited enjoyment, but also can act as catalysts in bringing in business that support outdoor recreation. Issaquah needs a gathering place that actually draws bikers and hikers downtown, and then from there to the hills beyond. We need to protect the environment, but we also need to provide opportunities to enjoy it. We need to do a better job in packaging Issaquah as the gateway to those beautiful hills that surround us. And finally, we should be proud of the city's heritage and showcase it for our visitors. I would like to begin a process to create a new, complete, modern museum to highlight our past because it influences our future. After many years, the Human Services Commission is close to realizing their dream of providing a place to help the less fortunate in our community. I would like to see a similar process to showcase our history. This would have to be a public-private endeavor. This would be one of many possibilities to get projects done in the city. So thank you for considering my application. And if you have any questions, I certainly would be willing to answer them. I have my information is at the bottom of that sheet. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joan. Brian Weinstein is next. Brian, welcome.
Hey, Mayor Butler, City Council, residents of Issaquah. My name is Brian Weinstein, and rather than go through and answer a series of questions, some of those answers of which I've already submitted to the council, I'm going to tell sort of a brief narrative story here, and I hope it amuses you or horrifies you. I don't know which it will be, but this is some information that I'd like to give you about myself. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I was born and raised there. I attended the University of Southern California. I graduated there with a degree in business administration. I became a California certified public accountant, worked for many years auditing municipalities, for one thing, other small businesses, large businesses, did income tax returns for all sorts of businesses, corporations, partnerships, as well as individuals. In 1992, I was offered a employment opportunity by an upstart finance company in Portland, Oregon, to become their chief financial officer, which I took, and managed to grow that company to a large international diversified finance company. We had over 400 employees worldwide. We syndicated, for lack of a better term, junk bonds on Wall Street, and we were very successful. My son Noah was born in 1999, and I decided that would be a good opportunity to change careers, and I got involved in information systems. And in 2000, I was offered a position at Microsoft here in Washington, and I moved to Issaquah. I can't tell you how great it is to live in an apartment and be able to walk to work. And I did that for a year, and Issaquah was a great place that I enjoyed seeing and enjoyed living. And I decided that in 2001, I would buy a house here in Old Town, which is exactly what I did. And my family and I have been living there ever since. In 2010, Microsoft and I had a parting of the ways, and I pursued some self-employment opportunities here in Issaquah as a business consultant and a programmer. I also did a lot of volunteer work, got involved with a boutique software company, and the next thing I knew, I was back at Microsoft, where I work now for Bing. When I moved here in 2001 to a house in Old Town, one of the things that became apparent to me was there was going to be a road built in our neighborhood. That road was called the Southeast Bypass. I, coming from Los Angeles, looked at what the potential for that would be in our neighborhood and saw, like a lot of people did, a freeway going through Tiger Mountain. Talking with a lot of folks in the neighborhood, getting involved at community meetings, talking with people on the council, including Mayor Freisinger at the time, as well as boards and commissions, it became evident to me that the city had involved in a flawed process based on flawed policy that was going to result in a flawed result, a defined result. And I didn't think that was right. I got more involved, talked with more people, and next thing I knew, Mayor Freisinger was kind enough to appoint me to the Planning Policy Commission, where I sat for a while. Continued to learn a lot of things about the city of Issaquah, and in 2003 decided to run for city council. I can't tell you what it's like to go knocking on doorbells, knocking on doors, people's homes all around the town, people you don't know, and have them tell you what it's like to live in Issaquah, how much they love it, in some cases how much they would like for it to be better. You listen to their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, and you take that in. And when you come to candidate meetings or go to debates, you try and voice that, and you try and think of those people and what they would want and how Issaquah can be better for them. In the end, I didn't win, but the bypass wasn't built either. Up until 2007, I was still involved in what was happening in Issaquah. I noticed that there was sort of a fiscal fiscal responsibility issues. I just sort of felt the city has so many assets, so many opportunities to do things in a way that doesn't burden taxpayers, doesn't burden its residents, doesn't burden our businesses. I ran for election again in 2007 against then Council President Fred Butler, now Mayor Butler. I didn't win, but I still got involved. I still became interested in things that are happening in our community. I got involved at Issaquah High School in junior achievement and teaching business and finance to some of the students there. And one of the things I always tell students are what I call the 4 cardinal rules of finance. More is better than less, sooner is better than later, certain is better than uncertain, and use other people's money. Issaquah sits on some of the best assets on the east side, parks. Everybody wants to come to our parks. We don't have enough parks that have lighted fields, or in some cases not enough unlighted fields. Trails that are the envy of the whole Puget Sound. We have beautiful Lake Sammamish and everything that that asset can be as a place for business, recreation, and enjoyment. We have the plateau and everything that's happening up there. We have our amazing people resources, all of our citizens who live here. We have existing businesses, and we have an environment that is capable of bringing in even more. And yet, when I look at all of these things, like a lot of citizens, I see that the growth that we have had in the last 20 years has not paid for itself. We have, at this point, nearly $27 million of debt to the city against 31,000 people who live here. That's nearly $900 per person in debt. If growth had been paying for itself, we wouldn't need all of those bonds for parks, for services, and councilmanic bonds that the city council has decided to get indebted with without a vote of the people. Many of us wonder why our huge growth has not paid for improvement to roads, parks, city infrastructure, our pool, and maybe even a second pool, and certainly our schools as well. What I have found is there's a systemic lack of bargaining power, or even the desire to represent our citizens when we go to the position of coming to contracts with developers, with businesses, with anybody who wants to get involved and help the city of Issaquah. We are on the short end of the stick. Transportation, how exactly has our partnership with Sound Transit and Metro benefited residents who still are without convenient transit, and what's going to happen in the future? For our human services, I still don't know where our single point, our place of a human service campus is. For parks and recreation, we have a bond issue that's coming up. We shouldn't need a bond issue to pay for improvements to the Julius Bohm Pool with all the improvements and with all the growth that we've experienced. Fiscal constraints on vital city resources. We often hear we are limited to headcount, we are limited by money. I need to know why. And if I were on the council, I would want to find out why. Finally, many of our residents talk about the changing nature of our neighborhood that so many citizens look at. Multifamily construction that's taking place in Old Town, 4-story buildings, notice given to people, not given to people, additional traffic, already there's so much cut-through traffic, and noise as well. If appointed to the council, I would like to change the calculus of how our fiscal policies are made. I would like to have the council look at all of the policies the council has to create, from the boards and commissions, from the city staff, and come to a recognition that where is the city being benefited when we talk about our residents, the business, the environment. How are we going to get not the short end of the stick anymore from the business dealings, from whatever contractual obligations, whatever discussions we want to have with our regional partners and everybody else who's out there. Issaquah has a great need for services, for jobs, for an economy that generates quality jobs for our residents, and continues to make Issaquah a great destination for everything that we need: people, businesses, and visitors. That's what's important. Some things that you may not know about me: I am not a curmudgeon. I ride a motorcycle. I also drive a Jeep. I like the Three Stooges. I like cheese. We all love Issaquah. We are all looking at the same thing. You'll hear these same themes, I'm sure, from every very well-qualified person who wants to sit on the council. The only thing that's different is our point of view. And I would like to offer you my point of view for the benefit of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Our next applicant is Nina Mulligan. I may have, I can do a better job
Would you like
pronouncing
to
your last name. Nina Milligan.
Thank you,
My apologies.
Mr. Mayor. And I brought copies of my comments. I've just given the clerk speech notes. They're not really a speech, they're just speech notes to perhaps spur your memory later if you're wondering what it is I said about that. And I want to say right off the bat that I've forgotten what I was going to say. I'm really glad I have notes because I so love listening to the presenters of the other applicants. This is a great opportunity for me to get to know my neighbors, and I'm so impressed with this pool of applicants that now I've forgotten what I was going to say to you. But the first thing I'm going to say is thank you, and thank the members of the council and Mr. Mayor and the staff and all of you who've come to support us for this opportunity to present my application for the open seat on the City Council. And I'm going to use the structure of the questions that you provided to give you a little bit more information about me. I tended to focus on a couple of the things I'm most interested in, but I would say that one of the things about serving on the City Council is that you get to discuss and work on such a variety of things. And I really appreciated Joan Probola's overview of many of the topics that the City Council addresses, and I look forward to that. That's one of the reasons why I would like to be on the council. I currently serve on the Urban Village Development Commission, and I'm very happy with that appointment. I enjoy the work we do. I enjoy land use issues. But after being there for about 8 years, I'm ready and eager to jump out and look at bigger pictures or things that are more all-embracing and the interconnectedness of issues that face the city. That's one reason why I would like to serve on the council. Who would I represent? Well, I would represent the entire city. Like the rest of us have said, and we know we don't have districts, I would represent the entire city. I thought I might take an angle on that question, thinking that maybe what you're looking at is, well, who is she? Is she somebody different or special, or maybe a part of a group, something that would reflect on who she might represent more than another. But I'd like to say to you that I'm a combination that I hope will be helpful to the council. I'm a nostalgically native Washingtonian. I love old Issaquah. I was born in Seattle. I grew up my youngest years in Bellevue and then moved up to Langley on Whidbey Island and grew up there. I went to college in Ellensburg, coming through here, hiking, using Issaquah for all it had to offer. So I love Issaquah for what it's always been. But my husband and I bought into the new Issaquah. We live in Issaquah Highlands, and we certainly sincerely, in buying our home there, made a vote for what Issaquah could be. And that's one thing that the Issaquah Highlands is showing. So I'd say that I look at these things from both sides, an old and a new citizen. What would I like to contribute to the city was another one of your questions. And I made, just in case you wouldn't know this, but like all of us, we would contribute care, understanding, compassion, patience, generosity, and enthusiasm for the city. All of us would do that. And so I was trying to think, though, what would be different from me, about me. One thing that I would contribute is a broad understanding of wide-ranging topics. In the application form, you asked about our formal education, and I put down my college education, but I also put down that I spent 6 years attending continuing legal education programs. And that's a little crazy, and I don't know anybody else who's done this. I worked for a company that offered these around the country. I spent time in other jurisdictions, from upstate New York to Boston to Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, and learned about many topics while I did that. They included environmental protection, risk management, land use planning, real estate and investments, transportation, energy policy, utilities management, corporations, closely held businesses, and family businesses. And I really want to put that to use. I'm looking for a position that addresses so many different topics. I also am unique in that I have served on the Urban Village Development Commission for 8 years, and I was involved in the Central Issaquah Plan, so I feel well informed about many of the things in our future that we're working on. And I have a deep passion, fondness, and respect for the functions of government and the rule of law. I like working in the structure of a government body. I like the way the rules are set up and the civility of it all. It's something that I enjoy very much. You asked what we thought would be the biggest opportunities or issues and how would we solve them. And I'd like to approach both those topics and say that our biggest opportunity in Issaquah is our biggest treasure, our greatest treasure, and that's our location and our natural surroundings. I appreciated the comment earlier that we're at this crossroads, and that is an important part. It's not just a crossroads of people, but it's a crossroads of nature, where mountains and watersheds come together. I think that the people take seriously the role of steward for the key elements of our region's environment, not just Issaquah's. Being on the shores of Lake Sammamish, managing and being stewards of its great watershed, especially with Issaquah Creek. This is all very important to us, and it would be to me too. I'd like to leverage those opportunities that a city government can employ to focus our efforts on restoring and preserving our natural assets as they being the most important things that we have. But the question also allowed us to talk about what challenges face the city of Issaquah. And it's oversimplifying, but I would, for the sake of the presentation, I'd like to say that it's the rate of growth is the greatest challenge in the city of Issaquah. I think that we could find a better balance. We could balance better with environmental stewardship. I believe that it's difficult to address, for instance, the managing of stormwater in an ever urbanizing environment. And I think we could also balance residential growth better with business opportunities and jobs. Think of it this way. I pulled some statistics for you. Our average home price is $450,000. According to the census, 60% of our population has a bachelor's degree or better. The mean travel time to work for Issaquahians is almost 30 minutes, and the median household income is $87,000. These statistics indicated to me that our brain power and income earning power is going outside of Issaquah, and I would like to keep it here. I'd like to attract great employers and to incent entrepreneurs. And with that, though, I don't want to forget to thank those businesses who are here, Costco, Swedish, the rest of the medical community, which continues to find this a good place to have business, Sanmar, and the many others who provide business and job opportunities for people. You asked if we felt strongly about a topic and the majority felt otherwise. How would we address that? Not unlike the others, I would express my opinion as best I can, dig deep and think if I'm saying it correctly and can I say it a different way. I'd like to listen and re-listen to the majority, ask some better questions, see what it might be that I'm missing. But if in the end I hold a different opinion than the majority, I would have to vote. I'd like to vote my opinion so that it's clear and it's stated for the record. But then you move on and accept the decision of the council and work towards the next topic. If I were selected to fill the vacancy, what would I like to accomplish during the term of office? term of office going to November 2015, where I'd like to work on balancing residential growth with commercial growth. And I'm excluding, I think we have plenty of retail growth, by the way. I'm looking for commercial growth that can employ those people that I identified earlier. And I'd like to create a city where professionals live and actually work and play. We know they live and play here. And I'd like to maximize the groundwork that the Central Issaquah Plan has provided and the efforts of our Economic Vitality Commission. And why would I want to do these things? I think that the commercial development will improve our tax base, referring to comments earlier in that regard. I'd like to reduce the need for travel outside the city to work. This reduces the demand for transportation, which we find a challenge and an expensive proposition. I also find that
30 seconds.
Thank you. Transportation, if we can reduce transportation needs, we can reduce its environmental impacts. I believe that living and working in this town would strengthen families, increase engagement in the community, and increase engagement and pride in our environment. In closing, I just wanted to bring up, maybe some of you have seen that in the Sunset Magazine, we were named the best burb in Sunset Magazine. It's coming out in the February issue, and that's kind of neat. But the Merriam-Webster's definition of a suburb is an outlying part of a city or town.
That's time.
Thank you. And I'd like to be the city or town. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. I'd like to call forward Tim Flood. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and council members and city staff, and really everyone that's here for your service and for hearing me out this evening. My wife and I love the city of Issaquah. I won't go through everything I have down because you've heard it already, what makes Issaquah such a special place to live. And I look at the role of the city council as making decisions that help to basically maintain and, if possible, improve the quality of life that all of our citizens have. I look at a position like council as an opportunity to give a voice to the citizens I represent and to help shape the city's future. I'd like to talk just a bit about my qualifications and then make sure I address the questions on the application and touch on how I would approach a seat on the council. Personally, I'm originally from the state of Maryland, where I earned my bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland College Park in business administration. After a year in Boise, Idaho, I've spent the past 7 years in Washington, all on the east side, the last 2 years being in South Cove. I've earned my MBA here in Seattle, the City U, and I make my living in information technology. I currently hold the title of account director for an analytics consulting firm, and I'm also pursuing another graduate certification in data analytics. I've been married to my wife, Lauren, who is a fourth grade teacher in the city of Bellevue for the past 3 years, coming up on 4 years. So I'm very impressed with my fellow applicants and a lot of their board service and years of service. So I have a little bit different resume, but I've spent my time over the past several years volunteering for causes that I believe in. Namely, the first of which is Washington Conservation Voters. I was fortunate enough to be able to interview our current mayor, who earned our endorsement in this past election season. And I think it's safe to say we gave him the 26% that he needed to get to crest the 75% mark. That's a joke for the millions watching at home. Also a graduate of the Issaquah CERT program, which is the Community Emergency Response Team. Happy to hear a couple of mentions this evening, and also a member of the Issaquah Citizens Corps. And through that process, I was able to see, similar to this process that I went through one time before, and tonight, just how many people there are out there. There are hundreds of people within Issaquah and Costco specifically that have gone through that program. I had a chance to speak with a gentleman here this evening from Eastside Fire and Rescue, and I'm proud to represent that organization as a CERT. I've been elected a precinct committee officer for my neighborhood. I was on the Proposition 1 Parks bond that came up for election and won with 77%. this past election cycle. I was a founding member of the Friends of Lake Sammamish State Park. I attended a training and got a certificate in nonprofit board service with an organization called Seattle Works, which I volunteered for on a number of occasions. And throughout the years, I've done other volunteering, from registering voters. I was a big brother. I volunteered at Eastside Baby Corner here in Issaquah, you may be familiar with, and as well as multiple events in South Cove, which is a neighborhood that still has an annual Easter egg hunt and polar bear swim and all sorts of things that make it such a great place to live. Enough about me. Let's talk about Issaquah. There's a lot going on in Issaquah, from the potential annexation of Klahani and the implementation of the Central Issaquah Plan to the issues the council is facing with the LRIG, which I think we've made some progress on in the past week. Maybe we'll talk about later tonight. The council continually faces decisions to maintain or improve the quality of life of its citizens during this time of population growth and often national economic uncertainty. The council is tasked with balancing economic development and financial stability with environmental preservation as well as community services and events. By casting votes and through the budgeting process, council members are asked to prioritize projects based on any number of factors, considering the impacts on those who live, work, shop, and play in Issaquah, not just those who live in Issaquah. If given the opportunity to serve in the City Council, I believe I'd be able to strike that balance. On the business side, on the economic development front, I have 2 business degrees, and I have a career in business and information technology. I've also got some ideas right off the bat that I could bring to the council in terms of things to spur economic development, a couple of which are job fair, basically featuring Issaquah employers and targeting Issaquah residents. I think prior applicant mentioned the same sort of mentality to see if we can improve the number of folks that live and work in Issaquah. Another idea I had was to open a tennis facility comparable to the one that's at Robbinswood in Bellevue to fill the void of my beloved Sammamish Club, which is still there, but doesn't appeal to me anymore as I'm a tennis player. I've got a few other ideas as well, but I think there's things that we can do, some new ideas. And a lot of them involve basically enlisting the help and empowering some of our citizens. Maybe we have liaisons or ambassadors for people that live in Issaquah that may work at some of these target employers that we want to know what's going on at Amazon or at Expedia or at Costco, or and hear those voices and incorporate what they have to do. And when the opportunity presents itself, reach out to those companies and say, if you're looking to move, grow, expand, consider Issaquah, and here's why. With an eye towards environmental protection, I mentioned I volunteer for the Washington Conservation Voters. I served on the Pro Park Bond Board, and before I ever lived in the city, I would visit the city basically to go and hike on the trails, as someone else mentioned before, that they're the pride of the city. So Cougar and Tiger Mountain, I think, are, along with the state park, obviously are very valuable to the city. And to summarize that point, to be an effective city council person, you've got to strike that balance, have that balanced perspective, and I think that my experience and then my volunteerism, I have that sort of balanced perspective to bring to the council. The biggest issue facing the city, I'm going to echo the sentiments of a lot of the folks, and I know it takes up a lot of your time, is traffic. Issaquah is surrounded by mountains, bordered by a lake, and has a major interstate running down the middle. As the city continues to grow and draw shoppers from surrounding areas, it's not surprising that traffic is the biggest issue we face. And speaking with a current member of the council last month and reviewing the applications of my fellow applicants, it looks like I'm not alone in thinking that the city's planned growth could potentially only exacerbate our traffic issues. We're fortunate that the mayor serves on a countywide transportation commission, and that we have a lobbyist now, a part-time lobbyist, and that our former city council member gives us another voice in Olympia as well, potentially to steer some of the transportation funding towards Issaquah. As a member of the council, I would consider this point of view, the point of view that the growth will only exacerbate the traffic issue, and would advocate and vote for policies that serve to improve traffic within the city for its residents and for those working, shopping, and playing in our city. The Central Issaquah Plan and Urban Village concept reinforce the goal of using alternative forms of transportation, including pedestrian and bike lanes. I would apply those same concepts to improving existing areas of the city, in addition to designing new developments. Who would you represent? Obviously, in the city, we don't have districts, so I think the point of that is so that everyone on the council actually has to balance what different parts of the city are advocating for. And as with any council member, I do wear many hats. So while you do represent the city as a whole, you are here as a representative of the area that you're from and the organizations that you're a part of. In my case, as a resident of South Cove, I would certainly act as a voice for my friends and neighbors in the South Lake Sammamish area. As an Issaquah CERT graduate, I would give a voice to the hundreds of trained volunteers Issaquah is lucky to have in cases of emergencies. As a volunteer for Washington Conservation Voters, I would advocate for the protection of our city's parks, streams, green space, and storm drainage. As part of a young professional family with 2 master's degrees in our household, I represent the interests of young families who look to the highest level of safety, education, and recreation. These are also the types of families we want to appeal to as the city's population grows. I would also bring an open mind to the issues faced by the council and enjoy learning more about the areas of the city which I have spent less time in, and represent the thoughts and the priorities of the different areas of the city as I'm out there and I hear more. One question refers to how would you settle disagreements, and in a word, I would filibuster, and I would no. Until I got my way.
30
I
seconds.
think that's how it works, right? I think all the council members and applicants here tonight are here out of a desire to serve the city, and the votes and how we aim to do that may differ over time. But I think I don't think there's many 6-to-1 votes from what I see. I think there ends up being a consensus on many issues, and I think it's okay to be on the losing side of an argument and to maybe take it up the next time or compromise in some way in terms of what measures you guys end up passing, or we end up passing if I'm on the council. Whether or not I agree with any of my colleagues, I'll always maintain a friendly and respectful level of discourse and hope to build and maintain strong working relationships. No 30 seconds? Okay, I didn't hear that. One last thing. The job of the council, like I said, is to just maintain or improve the quality of living in the city. And if given the opportunity, that would be just what I would attempt to do. Thank you so much.
Tim, thank you. Our next candidate, and I believe our final candidate, is Cyrus Crone. Cyrus, welcome to the microphone.
Mr. Mayor, council members, community, friend, Nina, neighbor, Brian, thank you very much. Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to first thank the mayor for the respectful and civil campaign against Joe. And as a resident of Issaquah who's been involved in national politics, the vitriol has become too much for our society, and I commend you for your campaign. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, and then get into a couple of the issues that I care about, some of the things that I've done as a resident of Issaquah in my 11 years here. I'm the father of 3, husband of 1. My wife, Jennifer Crone, was born and raised here in Issaquah. I moved to Seattle in 1995. She snatched me up, and we've raised a family, and I have no regrets whatsoever, and I call Issaquah home. In my career, I've been involved in national and state politics at the federal and national level, and I made a decision about 1.5 years ago to give up that life, return to Issaquah, and make a commitment to focus on my family, my career locally, and the city, which I hold so dear to me. I've made contributions to the city, more getting my hands and feet dirty than being involved in commissions, although, as I said a moment ago, I've made a commitment to the city of Issaquah. I have applied for commissions, and I've also joined the Citizen Advisory Committee I'll speak to momentarily. There are a few matters that have affected us locally that I jumped on based on my commitment to the city I wanted to share with you. First, you'll recall, and thank you very much for the service from the police department, when we had the gunman who held the high school hostage. I think the entire police force from a 10-mile radius of here was at the high school, and there was nobody actually tending to the streets. And as a resident of Bush Street, everyone was backed up and trying to figure out what to do about the situation. So I volunteered as part of the Citizen Corps to help direct traffic and migrate everybody where they needed to go. Second Avenue, which is a very busy thoroughfare, and also not a lot of protection for the children who use that to walk to school, to my knowledge, is not maintained. Over the course of the last couple of years, the seedlings and just sap from the trees, et cetera, has lost about 3 to 4 inches of that sidewalk. And I've been waiting for the city to maintain it. And what's happened is that the children are getting closer and closer to Second Avenue. And I fear that one day I'm going to get a call that one of the kids accidentally slipped off the sidewalk and got hit by a car as that traffic moves so busily down that street. So got a group of people together, and we took the afternoon to go and clean up that sidewalk, and the kids now have an additional 3 to 4 inches, which is an important 3 to 4 inches of space to walk. The woods, both between Second Avenue and the middle school, as well as the woods between Second Avenue and the elementary school, are oftentimes littered with needles, and I take walks through that part of the area from time to time to observe what's occurring, and it looks like maybe we have people sleeping in the woods there in the evening, and what other kinds of illicit drug activity is taking place there. I'm taking a personal responsibility and going to clean up, and it is a serious issue. I know I disagree with Josh a little bit on the skate park and needing more funding for it. I will say that irrespective of the decision to move the skate park, which I'm very pleased the council is doing, that's not going to stop the activity that occurs there. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that. We certainly don't want to clear cut that to make everything visible, but there's got to be some formula there to make sure that the kids are safe. Lastly, volunteering during Salmon Days and helping local communities and business prosper. I guess I have the fortunate position of being the last speaker and not really time for rebuttal. Brian and I, as neighbors, have had healthy conversations. I think the only thing that I choose to disagree with his comments on relates to the Southeast Bypass, which I was a supporter of. And if you spent any time in Austria or Switzerland, they've managed to do a great job with their Alps and highways through those systems, and I think that we could do the same if we approached it wisely. But the traffic situation is severe, and I don't quite know how to address it, both in the Highlands, which I don't know how you solve because the infrastructure has been created, but then in the lowlands to move the traffic around towards Black Diamond. We have limited opportunities there. A little bit more about my experience in government. At the federal level, I've worked in the White House twice for a sitting president and vice president, obviously. At the national level, I've been involved in electoral politics, and then at the local level, focused from media in terms of how the newspaper industry is suffering and how we continue to communicate with our citizens at the local level to ensure that they're receiving proper information about their societies. In terms of the biggest challenges I see, obviously traffic that I mentioned a moment ago, urban planning, in full disclosure, I have minimal experience with, and our infrastructure. A lot of my efforts previously in the federal government have been involved around the energy grid and the digital divide, and how technology plays a part in citizen government and open government, and ensuring that the voices of the people are not only heard, but that they get to participate through the use of technology. And there are others who have spoken tonight eloquently on that subject who have backgrounds as well. In terms of who I care to represent, as I mentioned earlier, I have 3 young children, and I'd like to represent the kids. I look at the funding that the City Council has already put forth for the parks and the new pool and the skate park, and don't want to look at that strictly as a budgetary decision, but the implications of how that development will take place and how that will affect children's and teens over the coming years. The Julius Bone Pool in particular could just be rebuilt status quo with the lanes, but if you go and look at cities and municipalities like Missoula, Montana, and others who have created a community around their pool systems by making it more park-oriented than purely athletic, I would encourage the city and would like to be a part of looking at those aspects of upcoming development. Also, and Joshua, to the point I was making earlier, and you can read my full blog entry at cyruscrone.com/blog, the point that I was making really pertained to the fact that we've got a great venue right behind the police station in Memorial Park, which would be a safe environment, and the amenities and commercial aspects nearby wouldn't require additional funding because we have restaurants and access. I would discourage skateboarders from going to the bars before they get into the park, but all of that exists at present. Lastly, in the spirit of full disclosure, I'm in the process of launching a new local media property, Issaquah Daily, and I'm not sure if that presents a conflict of interest, that my aspirations within the community also involve local media and journalism, and juxtaposing a role on the city council while publishing a news and information site. I wanted to make sure you were cognizant of. Regardless, that will be launching in the not too distant future. In terms of contributions, I think the best contribution that I could provide based on my experience and background, 18 years at Microsoft, 4 years at Yahoo, is how we apply technology to not only the community through making easier and inexpensive access to the internet available, affordable access to the internet, but then providing citizens a more participatory way to get involved in our government. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your service. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Cyrus, thank you very, very much. So the council will make a decision on which of the 7 applicants you've heard this evening at our first council meeting in February. I would like to thank each of the 7 candidates for taking the time to come this evening, and more importantly, for stepping forward. We could tell from the presentations that this is an extremely well-qualified group, an impressive group of dedicated citizens who are willing to give their time and put themselves before the council to represent the citizens in Issaquah. So I'm glad that that's a council decision and not a mayoral decision, unless, of course, it's a tie vote, and I certainly don't want to be in that position. So again, thank you very, very much. Moving now to